Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Kihon Miller here from Warrior Concepts here in East Central Pennsylvania. So if you're in the area, by all means, stop in and see us. We're at Warrior Concepts Black Belt and Life Mastery Academy. All right, now we got that out of the way. Anyway, so this week we're going to jump right in. So we're going to be taking a look at this Kihon Happo principle, right? A lot of people that are training in Bujinkan, Nijutsu, whatever, know this as a set of 8 techniques, right, that have been generally standardized along the way, but we're going to take a look at it from a different perspective. And even if you know the principle itself, well, we're going to blow things out. So I got a lot to cover, a couple of examples once we get where we're going. But again, as always, this springboards off of the theme that we launch on Monday of any given week. So if you caught this week's, adjust my camera here. If you caught this week's Kuden podcast this past Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, then we were talking about creating options, and those with the most options in any given moment have the greatest chance of success, right? And so, but we also talked about things that people say and they accept to be true and those kind of things, and how those things can be a trap. So we're going to jump into those things as well. So let me just bring up my notes so I don't forget anything. Again, if you are signing in and saying hey and all that, I will catch up with you afterwards. This isn't like Kuden where I have my guy, James Alexander, in the wings, kind of handling things for me and whatnot. This is me flying solo to get out more information for you so that you can train. Also coming up here, hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week, we will have a bunch of shorter clips that will start appearing in people's timelines if you're on Facebook or some of these other social networks and whatnot that kind of hone in on a couple of key points. Probably only going to have maybe 5 per episode, whether it's Kuden or Whiteboard Wednesday. And then, of course, they'll point to full episodes and whatnot. So anyway, all right. So what I want to look at here is this idea of Kihon Happo. And again, most people know it as roughly 8 really standardized techniques. But we have a problem in Japanese. And I know that Hatsumi Sensei and the master teachers use this term, Kihon Happo, okay? Because it's not like it can't be used, right? Obviously, they're native Japanese speakers, so they can do whatever they want, right? However, maybe this is just my English major side coming out and being more particular when it comes to looking at language and just being more specific, right? So if we were talking about a list of 8 things, which is how people tend to see this, Kihon Happo, it's a list of 8 things, okay? Then this, which is a contraction of hachi ho, 8 ways. Okay, so it's in the ballpark, right? But as we'll see here shortly, based on a quote that I have from Takama Sensei, Hatsumi Sensei's teacher, right? If we had a list of 8 things, then this contraction would look different, right? Instead of happo, this would say Happan. Okay. Now we have fundamental 8 things. Okay. But that's. I know it seems like we're splitting hairs, but that's not what this is pointing to. Okay. It's pointing to this principle. All right. So again, we're going to focus on this and take a look at how this thing really works, but we're going to branch it out because there's multiple ways to kind of approach this, okay, that I've discovered or been led into understanding in the last, I don't know, let's just say 40 plus years of training just in this system, okay? So we're also going to take a look at this idea of creating variations, for those of you who know what we're pointing to here, right? Versus creativity for creativity's sake, okay? Because people have heard Hatsumi Sensei, he'll kind of point this kind of stuff out in any given technique, or if you have any of the books that are written in Japanese or anything, right? You look through some of these techniques, and you get to one where, like, it goes through, and then there's an ending. Okay, cool. There's an ending to the technique, right? And then there's something with an A, something with a B. So, right. So there's multiple endings. Interesting. Okay. So, but Hatsumi Sensei will say, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. Kind of like, this doko no kamae kind of thing. People will talk about, you can put your hand here, you can put your hand here, you can put your hand here, you can put your hand, right? And so people that really don't understand what's being conveyed, right, take those as options, but almost from a perspective where you can just choose based on preference. Okay. So they're all right. And that's not true. But under what conditions is any one of those more correct than the others? Okay. Based on distance, or based on what you're trying to communicate to him, or what you're trying to get to convey, or how you're trying to manipulate him or get him to move a certain way, or see a certain opening that's really fake, but he sees it as an opening, kind of thing, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at creating these variations, right, in a much more logical way, based on critical thinking, and based on, again, we're only going to look at a couple of variables today. There's way more than this, and based on the context and what we're doing here, the format of this training, I don't have time for more. Okay, so let's start here, right? The goal. Do I have any other colors? Well, let's use this, right? So the goal we're ultimately aiming for, which is something Hatsumi Sensei has spoken on and written about, and it's in videos and whatnot, again and again and again, right, is getting to this concept of freedom, right? He'll often call it returning to zero. Okay? Zero is not empty. Exactly, right? It's empty of predetermined shape, right? So it's devoid of a set way, but there are obviously principles and concepts that make something right or not, like human beings, right? Our cells constantly subdivide. It's happening every second, every minute, every hour of every day, of every month, of every year that we're alive, right? And somehow along the way, we don't morph into a tree or a rock or a truck tire, whatever, right? There's some kind of underlying thing that keeps this human body a human body, right? So there's this continuity, right? So, but we're aiming for this freedom, right? Where we can adapt and fit in and control things seemingly any way we want. And that's kind of the trick, right? It's not really any way we want, other than the way we want is whatever you want, sweet pea, is okay with me. Okay. But we have to be able to adapt to situations to be able to know when to take control, when to let him control, when we have an opening that we're safe to exploit, those kind of things. Right. So, and while we can put our hand in all these different directions, or we could do this, or we could do this, or whatever Hatsumi Sensei points out to, or points to, it's really, the Japanese teachers use an English phrase, case by case, right? It's a case by case basis, right? It depends on the situation. It depends on a whole bunch of variables, which we'll talk about some of those today. One example that I have, we're going to focus on something that you need to tune into. Another one is something we can more intellectually or strategically choose. Okay. So anyway, if you were on for Kuden this week, then you've already picked up on this. I'm going to reframe it a little bit more toward the taijutsu side of things instead of just a life option, right? But I took folks through this idea of options, okay? Getting to this idea that to attain freedom, or to even start to touch on it, right? To even start to approach it in any given situation, in any given moment, right? Any opportunity to strike, kick, uke nagash, move to a kamae, whatever. unless we have three or more, that's a plus sign, three or more options in any given moment, uh, we're not free. Okay. And that's where a lot of folks kind of screw this up because they'll think that they can just do whatever because their partner's standing there in a punch pose or whatever. But life's messy and fights are messier, right? So what we did is we actually started because Kuden is more about life skills and whatnot, and then applying it across uh, self-defense and relationships and whatever, right? But there's this saying that people have, right? Well, I didn't have a choice, right? I didn't have any other options, okay? Or well, let's just go back to the I didn't have any choice, right? I had no choice, right? Okay, which is not true, right? That's like one of the biggest lies that people tell themselves and other people, okay? Because the only human beings that have zero choices are dead people, okay? Literally no choice, okay? You're gonna breathe or you're not gonna breathe, no choice, okay? Well, he's not breathing, so I mean, but he didn't. That's not a conscious choice, okay? So what I want to do is take a look at some options here where people can go and miss. Okay, so one option, again, if you're in for Kuden, great. If not, I'm just going to quickly fill you in. So if you have one option, right, I called that slavery. Right, you're a slave. Okay, you're a slave to whatever is dictating that only one way. Well, of course, I do it my way is the best way. And okay, but that makes you like so predictable that you can't possibly understand how easily it is to control you. Okay. But this one option could also be we can't see anything more, or in this case, right, we're going to call it kata obedience. There's only one way to do the kata, sensei. There's only one way for it to be right. Okay. I know because my t-shirt said so. Okay. Have a nice day. Okay? Hope it always works out for you. Okay. But kata obedience could be style obedience, could be like, people looking for the one official way because they're afraid of being wrong, that kind of thing. Okay. So in this case, the person has no options. They have to do it that particular way. I have three new students currently that just joined here probably in the last 6 months or so that came from other martial arts styles, which is not a problem. People can come from anything. They're looking to add things or they're looking to expand, and they're running into this all the time and not always consciously. Okay. Consciously, they run into this because they were taught only one way of doing things, right? Well, it could be this nose to nose, toe to toe thing. And in ninjutsu, we always do this indirect engagement. So he's busy missing this way, and he was expecting a fight to happen like this, and suddenly I'm over here, or I'm flanking him and coming in from a different direction. Okay, and so they're having a hell of a time getting their head wrapped around. Well, where do I go? Which one, right? Which one do I choose? Okay. Well, for right now, stick to the technique and you'll start to build that strategic thinking and strategic understanding, right? But a lot of them, the old system, because it was very set, step one, step two, that kind of thing, right? For instance, all strikes have a wind up, right? That kind of thing, right? In ninjutsu, we don't have a wind up. Okay, anybody's doing a wind up is creating an opening, or they don't understand that one move actually positions the limb for the next strike. So any given move, strike, grab, or whatever, is the wind up for the next move. Okay, but if they're missing that, they'll I've seen people. I saw an instructor once, and he has a video out, and no names, right? Obviously his original martial art was one of these flashy Korean styles, Taekwondo, Tang Soo Do, Mudu Kwan, those kind of things, right? And so, but he's doing ninjutsu techniques. So he slips in and like everything's going well, flow and all that, slips a mushadori on his partner, right? This uplifting elbow shoulder dislocation kind of thing, right? Slips this thing on, the partner is going. And right in the middle of that, he lets the mushadori go, which means his partner comes back up so he can execute a spinning back kick. So we got a technique that's working perfectly, but we're going to let go of that, not realizing that I just gave him everything back. I gave him his structure back. I gave him his balance back. I gave him his ability to move, right, back. And I'm going to bet everything on speed and trickery that so I can do my favorite cool finish. Right? So that's blind obedience. Okay. If we have two options, right, what we have is a dilemma. Okay. The way this shows up in training or in a self-defense situation is a student doesn't know how to prioritize or doesn't know, they don't know how to shut down a body quickly. They know how to land strikes. They know how to apply techniques and things like that. But from a strategic perspective or even a tactical perspective where each thing is making the next thing easier, right? They don't know. Or they came from a point-based system or something like that where if I tag him, that, fight's over, okay? I've often told a story that I got secondhand from a teacher who did a seminar at this one event. It was actually a multidisciplinary, multi-style seminar. And afterwards, right, these three really high-level guys from some martial art came up and said, I think there was like 2 6 dans and a 7th dan, something like that. And they came up and they're like, that was really cool because he covered basics during this little breakout session that he was teaching. Basically, the conference was nothing but a whole bunch of breakout sessions. And so they came out and like, this is really awesome. Like, can you show us like an advanced technique? He's like, yeah. And so he, as he's telling the story, he's explaining like, 6th, 7th degree black belts. Yeah, these people should be able to understand like the really cool stuff, right? The really like hidden, trapping kind of things where you're not chasing things around and you're not always on the defense, hoping you can get a shot in or whatever. And so he says, what are you looking for a defense against? And they're like a kick to the head. He's like, okay. So one of the guys volunteers to be the uke and he steps in and does this side kick and it comes up at Sensei's head and Sensei just kind of turns and bows. And the kick shot straight over his back. And then from that position, he stood up into the kicking leg and took the guy off balance and then just kind of tagged him from behind to convey the message that like, I got your kidneys, your spine, everything back here is mine. But the big thing was just in the evasion and catching with the body, no blocking, nothing. Right. And he said, these guys just like absolutely perplexed. And he just figured maybe they didn't see him move. Okay. Because the guy kicked fast and he did his thing and whatever. So he goes, I'll show it again. Right. Go ahead. The guy kicks, right. He does the same thing, catches the leg, tags him in the back. These guys look completely confused. And he goes, you look confused. Why are you confused? And they're like, but that wouldn't work. What do you mean it wouldn't work? I just did it twice. No, that what you did, to his leg and behind him and all that, well, that wouldn't happen. That didn't count. And now he's really confused, right? And he's like, no, don't you get it? What I did was I made him waste a shot. And then I took advantage of the limb to break his balance and get him turned around so that I could access him from a direction that he can't defend against. And they're like, yeah, we saw that, but like, we can't use that. What do you can't use that? You can touch him lightly. You can touch him hard. You can break something. You can not. You can put him in a chokehold. What? No, we that we can no. Finally, what it came around to was from the point where he bowed and this guy stuck his kicking foot through this space right here. In their head, it counted as a point. It counted as a successfully landed kick because the foot went into the target zone. The fact that he wasn't there didn't matter. Okay? And so to them, they if he really wanted to kick you, he would have kicked you. So Sensei goes, okay, right? Balls to ass, kick as fast as you want. The kick came in, did the same thing, tapped him on the back, and the guys were still like, that he, like if he really wanted to kick you, he would have done that, and that's why the rest of it doesn't count because you'd be laying on your face. And he's like, did you really want to kick me? And the guy's like, well, yeah, but there's no but. I made you waste the shot, but they couldn't get out of this blind obedience kind of thing, right? So that's what I mean. These things can be drugged forward. So what ends up happening is if somebody's focused on point stuff or they don't know what to look for, right? They don't know what the next best shot will be from where they are, okay? What they end up seeing is like, I could do this or I could do this, right? But their brain locks up. They end up with a case of brain freeze, and I don't mean from ice cream, right? The brain just glitches. And then they hang up, and in an actual situation, somebody would tag them, right? This shows up in testing here at the Academy, where, especially in the lower level students, where they've learned to get out of the way and they've learned some techniques, but their test comes up, and I want to see if they're starting to integrate some of this stuff where they've learned a bunch of skills. They've learned different strikes, different kicks, different, and different kamae and whatnot. And then what I'll say is, okay, your partner, you can tell them what you want. Grab, punch, or kick. And I want you to show me some kamae evasion. You choose the kamae from your curriculum, evade, and then do some kind of a follow-up. Okay? So they'll tell their partner. And like everything all the way up to the kamae evasion is smooth. And then all of a sudden, they're looking around trying to decide what they have. Okay? Now, I have to mention this as well because it might not be 2, it might be 10. They might be overwhelmed with options, or because they don't have a form that Sensei gave them, right? They got out of the way, but now they don't know what to do because Sensei didn't tell them what to do. Okay? But either way, a dilemma is having 2 options that are either both good, both bad, whatever. In our head, people do this during political voting season, right? Well, like I'm not voting, dude, because what do I choose? Best of bad options, right? But whatever. Some people won't choose because they think that if they don't choose, like the person who doesn't vote, if they don't choose, well, then when shit goes sideways or shit goes south, well, you can't blame me, man. I didn't vote for anybody. Yeah, you did. You voted for yourself, and you voted for, I don't care what happens. There's always a third option. In dilemma, there's always more. But this creates a brain lock, okay? And so, again, we have this problem, right? So it's only when we have, and we can recognize 3 or more options in any given situation, do we start to approach freedom, all right? Freedom begins, but this leads us into which one will continue to break him down, which one will continue to knock him away from me, which one, like a lot of people will get out of the way and like they don't know what to do, so they'll just throw a shuto or something, and they hit like a broad muscle or the broad muscle on the back or something like that, which would do absolutely nothing to the person. Or they'll do this like little, like they'll do a flicky kick because they don't want to really touch their partner. They don't want to hurt them. Okay, well, you can touch your partner and like you're going to hit nerve cells, so it's going to hurt, but you're not going to damage them. Okay, so now what you're practicing to do is to not have your strikes land. oh, see, in a real fight, I would. No, in a real fight, you're going to do what you do when you train. Or if you don't train deeply enough, what's going to happen is other shit from prior to training or caveman stuff is just what's going to come out. And then you're going to walk away feeling like, you know, you spent a whole lot of time, effort, money for nothing. Okay. Or maybe you didn't spend money, time, effort, and YouTube video scrolling for nothing. Right. Right. So there's a lot of extra stuff that's in here. I'm going to come back to this thing here. Worded down here is Khan. Remember Khan. Okay. Not like Star Trek. Anyway, so where we're going to start with this whole idea, right? Because we're talking about Kihon Happo, we're talking about Henka, but to talk about Henka, we have to talk about techniques. We have to talk about any given kata before we can talk about Henka. Because a big problem that people have is either they're stuck on kata obedience, right? And they just know a bunch of those, okay? Or Henka variation is a cop-out. It's an excuse for shitty taijutsu. They couldn't do the technique right anyway, so whatever ended up happening was what they were left with or whatever. Or there is a third option. There's always a third option. Okay? If you hear any of my teachings, we always start with 3. Okay? In any given condition. It's a Gyoko-ryu principle. Right? Or they'll be creative for the sake of creativity. Okay? So they're trying to mimic Hatsumi Sensei's, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. But the question is why, right? So when we're creating solid Henka, we're creating technique variations, right? When we create technique variations, we're really creating new techniques without learning any new techniques, okay? So the point that I'm trying to make here, right, or we're going to lead into here is any given technique, right? Each of these models, right, is a gateway, not a box. Okay. But, and I've covered this in a previous Whiteboard Wednesday, probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that, 3 episodes ago, for those of you watching the recording. Hatsumi Sensei has said that way too many students move on from any given technique way too soon, which is why they not only can't do the technique, but they also can't make proper Henka. Okay? He has iterated over and over again throughout my training career. He'll stop in the middle of a technique and he'll say Henka, and then he'll say, do you understand why this is Henka? Because there's a huge difference between a true Henka, one who's using the same principles, concepts, strategic approach, tactical operation and whatnot to control him and the situation. There's a huge difference between that and doing whatever the hell you want. Okay? So even though one technique contains dozens of branching choices, right? What we really need to develop is the eye to see them, the kan, okay? Kan sounds really, really close to this other word in Japanese, which is gan, okay? In Mikyo, we have butsugan, right? Buddha eyes, or eyes of enlightenment, eyes that can see, right? We have Metsubishi. The other way to say this kanji for gan is met, right? Metsuki, right? Where you're looking, where you're staring. Metsubishi, right? Sight disruptors. So gan here is sight, and it specifically points to the eye. Okay? Kan is insight. Okay? It's a feeling or an intuitive sense or whatever that you get about what his next move is going to be, or what, how something should be approached. Okay, without actually being able to see it. Okay, so again, another story. During last night's Inner Circle weekly coaching call, one of the students had asked about this problem that he notices, because he trains regardless, right? But this problem where people will train when they're motivated, they'll train when they feel good, everything's good, right? I feel healthy, I feel clear, right? I'm ready to go, kind of thing. But on days when they get up and they've got brain fog, or they're in the middle of a pissing contest with somebody, or heartbreak, or grief, or whatever, right? Today's not a good day to train, right? Or they're injured, or they're ill, or whatever, right? So you can't train today because of no. It's a perfect freaking day to train, okay? Because part of this insight is recognizing that not only do we not know what fight style the attacker is going to bring, what the scenario is going to look like, where we're going to be, anything like that, right? Weapons, no weapons, multiple attackers, one guy, whatever. Not only do we not know those things, but we also don't know what our condition is going to be. We don't know if when we're that moment that we're being attacked, if we are perfectly well, or if we are ill, or we have an injury, or we've got brain fog, or whatever. We're thinking about another mental thing would be I'm thinking about what did she want me to bring home? Milk and bread. And next thing you know, I've been hit once, twice, whatever. And my brain has to go from what the hell, right? Because people assume that if they get hit, they know they've been hit because they train in a structured environment, right? But if we're out in the middle of, wherever we happen to be, let's say I just got out of my car and I'm thinking about this thing, but one of our local grocery stores is right next to a ball field, right? Where they play youth baseball and stuff like that, right? So if I got hit, my brain might be looking for the answer to what the hell just happened, because that could be a fist, but it could also have been a wild pitch or whatever from some kid with a baseball that hit me in the side of the face or whatever. Okay. So the point here is that everybody trains as though conditions are going to be perfect, but our brain has to go from what the hell is going on to realizing, shit, I'm being attacked, to making sense out of where the next one is coming from, so we can actually start taking control of, ourselves first before we can even take control of him or the situation or whatever, right? But there's this huge assumption that we're going to be perfectly fine. But the question is, when would we have a better chance? What possible training drill? There are some that we could do that kind of hint at it, but what possible drills or whatever could we do training-wise that could possibly replace training when we're sick, we're injured, we're pissed off at somebody else, or we're getting through grief, or we're depressed, or we're sad some other way, or I don't feel like it, or whatever, right? I'm exhausted. Man, I just worked a 14-hour shift, man. I'll work out tomorrow, okay? What better way is there to find out how your body's going to operate and what you're going to have to make up for, how you might have to choose kamae, footwork, angling, those kind of things, what you can and cannot do, what kamae, let's say, Hicho no kata would be, or kamae would be a really, really good one for this one, but my balance is off. I'm exhausted. I couldn't hold myself in one leg if I wanted to, right? So I know I can shift to an ichi no kamae from the Kukishinden school as a good replacement, because these single leg aren't going to work, right? Okay. Hay fever or other allergies or sinus conditions or whatever that throw your equilibrium off. Okay. There is no other better way, from my opinion, my humble opinion, you can train as you want, to know what I have to make up for, or to start asking the question, are there any mental skills, breathing skills? Is there anything within the art? Hello, sensei? Anything within the art that can help me get up to speed, to neutralize a lot of that brain fog, emotional state, whatever, right? So that I can pick and choose best skills, best approach, best strategy, and whatnot, so I don't get my ass handed to me. I mean, what's my other option, right? Bad guy comes up to me, threatening or whatever, and I go, dude, today's not a good day. Maybe come back to, no, you know what? Tomorrow's not looking good either. Okay. But people train that way. Like, if conditions aren't perfect, or I don't feel like it, like I'm going to feel like it when some of you guys maybe, because you're just looking for a fight. But anybody's in the self-defense realm, probably not, right? So when this person comes up, right? Okay. I'm going to have to operate based on who I am and what is going on, not just with him, what he's throwing, the environment I'm in. How many things of these things have we covered along the way? Clothing I'm wearing, clothing he's wearing, all kinds of variables and factors, right? But okay, all those fall under this insight because I can't see it in real time, but I know about it or I'm considering it or whatever. So I can start training and preparing for it. And I'm not stuck with my proverbial in my hand or my pants down when something happens that I didn't train for because, well, see, I didn't feel like training when I was ill. I didn't feel like training when I was sad. I didn't feel like training when I was exhausted. I didn't feel like facts and reality do not care about our feelings. People quote that all the time, and yet they're a slave to it. Okay. Anyway, all right. So let's keep moving here. Let's see. A couple of things I want to note here. Hatsumi Sensei's little lessons and Takuma Sensei's lessons. Okay. So Hatsumi Sensei, very early in my training, right, in talking about these kind of things and all these little factors, said he could write an entire book on any one kata, on any one technique, like a book. And he made his fingers like this. Write a book. Okay. Because there's so much in there, right? It's not just the moves. Okay. Takuma Sensei has said all you need is Kihon Happo. But here's the thing. The 8 forms that most people are attached to today didn't exist when I started. Okay? As a matter of fact, we had multiple examples of each model. Okay? I go into some of these in a program I made a bunch of years ago that's still available on the site. It's called the Advanced Sanshin Kihon Happo Home Study Course. Right, started out as a DVD thing, and now it's just all digital. No matter what a page says, you might land on. Anyway, so but what I teach in that is how we were originally taught, what has come to be known as these 8 techniques, but wasn't presented that way. As a matter of fact, it's not presented that way in the original Togakure Ryu Ninjutsu videos that Hatsumi Sensei came out with way back. There were 2 volumes, right? One had a bunch of kata models and whatnot, and then the other one talked about foundation and this Kihon Happo principle and listed chi no kata, sui no kata. But even the names were not the same. Okay, even the names were different. Okay, so. But not only did they not exist, these standard 8 techniques didn't exist when I got started. Okay, they didn't exist when Takuma Sensei made that statement. So what could he be possibly talking about with all you need is the Kihon Happo? You need the Kihon Happo principle. Okay, the way to make proper variations or adaptations to any given model. Okay, so that you could fit into whatever kind of situation went on, right? So let's take a look at this Kihon Happo process here very, very quickly. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything here. We already talked about kata obedience, all that kind of stuff, okay? So there are different approaches to these things, and we'll get to those. But so the first one, we're going to take a look at the Kihon Happo principle, right? So it's KH Kihon Happo, okay? The process, okay? So what this is being able to take any technique, right, and make 8 variations out of that technique. So let's pick one. Gyoko Ryu Joriako no Maki Kata number 1, Koku. Let's just pick Koku. Okay, Koku. Okay, Tiger Sky, False Void, depending on the kanji that's used to write it. So we're going to take Koku. We learn Koku. Okay, we learn this kata, and then we make 8 variations of it. Okay. Well, how many would we do that? Well, the first obvious variation would be doing it on the opposite side. Okay. So for left side forward to receive because he's throwing a power punch with his right hand, then I'm going to be right side forward because he's throwing it with the other hand, right? We could swap it out where he's reaching out to grab, single-handed or double-handed. He's kicking straight on, lateral, like a taekwondo kick, whatever. Okay, we could vary any of the points that are in the technique. Okay, so when I receive this incoming strike, right, uke nagashi, and then I deliver this shito. It says shuto the arm. Okay, it doesn't say where, okay, at all. But people will get this blind obedience because they have a case of anchoring bias. The first time they saw the technique, or maybe the first time they saw it that they could do it well, right, was this way, and that became the official way. But the scrolls don't say where on the arm to hit. Okay, so right, I receive, and then I strike. Right, so I could strike through down at an angle, breaks his balance, right, where I could move in and do the next thing. But he catches himself, throws this kick. I shift, right, do the next piece. Just looking at the uke nagashi. Okay, am I doing a swatting counter strike? Am I receiving it just by catching it? Am I receiving it so it goes up and out a little bit before I strike it? When I'm doing this counter attack with the shito, right, I could strike straight down. I could strike through it. I could strike it straight away. I could come up from underneath and hit it this way. All of those things will shift his weight on his feet in different ways to compromise him and put his weight on his back leg, whether he steps or not. So his oh shit moment to save himself with that front leg has to happen with the front leg. If I do this, the uke nagashi, and I do this strike to his arm, and my partner can kick me with his rear leg, only one of two things occurred. Either my partner knew that it was happening, and so he adjusted himself so he could keep his balance and he could throw a kick with the back leg. Or I don't understand the technique, and this part of the technique that creates a situation where, okay, yeah, but what if he really does kick with his rear leg? Okay, great other variation. Now, can I do the technique when he kicks with the other leg? Can I go to the outside of that one and counter, right? When I evade to the outside, right? And I do this counter kick that turns him around and I'm going to stab in the back, right? Do I kick with the trailing leg? Do I kick with the inside leg? We have both of those variations. Do I deliver a knee strike to kind of bump it up in the air a little bit and then I take a step behind him? Do I just kind of sweep the leg out of the way so it kind of moves, right? All kinds of variations, okay? We can substitute something else for the shuto. Maybe we're working with sword. So I receive and then I punch the tsuka, right? So it drives things down. Or I do uke nagashi in a bunting kind of way and then take the tsuba on my sword and punch his arm, right? Maybe I do uke nagashi and shove the butt of it into his face, so that drives his weight back, but it's not enough to take him out of the fight, and so that kick comes again. Okay? So I make these variations. Okay? 8. Happo. Hachi ho. Okay? Get back to this, right? Hachi ho. Happo is a contraction. 8 ways. Okay? 8 directions. But any number with ho added to the end of it when it gets contracted this way implies infinite. We start with 8, but if we take the number 8 in English, a lot of these things don't make a lot of sense when you try to translate them using kanji. But when you move to this, an 8 laid on its side is the infinity symbol. Okay? But this is not the end of it. This is not the process. This is the beginning of the process. And then we take any variation that we created and we make 8 variations of that. But wait, there's more. We take any variation and make 8 variations of that. The point is to get that to just become another variation of this strategy in motion among infinite variations. Any Star Trek geeks, right? The whole Vulcan idic, infinite diversity through infinite combination. It's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. except that came from Judaism, I think, right? Even though he was Vulcan. Go figure, right? So this will keep you busy for a long time. But while I gave a whole bunch of ideas here for how to make variations, is it just about strike substitution, applying different techniques that move them in the same direction, or replace a punch with a kick or a kick with a grab? Or no, it's not, right? This sa yu down here points to this part right here, okay? Sa yu is an old way of saying left to right. Okay? In today's world, we'd say hidari migi, right? So in some of the scrolls, right, you'll see sa yu and the name of the technique. In other scrolls, you'll see migi, hidari, migi, whatever. Like in the Kotoryu Kamai, right? Migi seigan no kamai, hidari seigan no kamai. Okay, you don't see it for the rest of them because ink was handmade and paper was expensive, so they wrote in shorthand, right? So all of them have a migi, hidari side, but it's not always just right and left either. Right leading, left leading. It's not just that either. Migi also points to ideal. Hidari points to do the best you can with what you have. So that might cause a variation. Okay. And so that leads us to one way that I introduce students to this, because they start to see the same theme over and over again if they can get past kata obedience is also just like it only shows up one way. Otherwise, I can't recognize it. I'll ask students to right in the middle of a technique, right? I'll say, which sanshin is in there? Which part of 3 sanshin are in there? Footwork, strike, whatever. Okay, so they can start to recognize these things. Okay, so what's really interesting about this is that the Kihon Happo process, this principle thing, comes from the Gyokoryu. Except there aren't those 8 techniques in the Gyokoryu. Okay, this is a combination of the, do I have space up here? Sanden Kamai, of which there is an example kata for each one. Ichimonzu no kata, Jumonzu no kata, Hichi no kata, right? And the, I'm just abbreviating here, Torite gata, right? Hand escape, right? Hand catching, dori, to grab or seize, right? So it's your hand or your arm or whatever, okay? So there are 3 of these, and there are 5 of these. 5 of these? Take that back. 8 of these. Sorry, 8 of these. Okay. Well, that's not 8. That's 11. Well, shit. Okay. But if we're doing them sa yu, okay, we just doubled them. Right? We just doubled the number of techniques that we have. Okay. Because when we change our side, but they don't attack with the opposite side. So which side are we changing? Are we changing which hand they're attacking with, and we're going to do it with the same size forward, which is going to put us either outside or inside, opposite the original way, or he still comes with the same thing, but I move in the opposite direction, okay? Which now doubles it again, okay? So interesting, right? Even the Gyokoryu's, what we call the Kihon Happo, and what's covered under this principle, not 8 techniques. Even if there were 8 techniques, we're supposed to be doing them on both sides. Okay? There is a list of kata called the sono kata. Sono kata, right? Sono kata often replace this torite kata, but sono kata means this thing or that thing, right? So there are 10 of those. Sono kata ichi, sono kata ni, sono kata san, right? So that thing number 1, that thing number 2. All of the odd numbers are on one side of the body. All the even numbers are on the opposite side of the body. Okay? So, again, we still don't have 8. Okay? So it's already pointing to all these different things, right? So anyway, so let's take a look at focus number 1. And this is going to be a thing to adapt to, right? Being aware of one's condition. And the reason why we teach from this, a lot of people think it's bullshit, right? Except that Stephen Hayes got this when he first went to Japan. Hatsumi Sensei assigned him Tanamura Sensei, his cousin, right? Who broke off and founded the Genbukan in the 80s. But Hatsumi Sensei assigned Hayes to Tanamura Sensei to begin his basic training. And what he was introduced to was the Godai no Kata. This Godai, 5 elements. Okay? So if we could get over all the bullshit we've heard from everybody else and accept that maybe this is pointing to something, because it actually gets pulled from Mikyo. And Mikyo, the 5 elements are ways of classifying things. Okay? I'm going to focus on classifying one variable that involves us in any given situation that a lot of people don't account for. Okay? So if you know these, great. If not, welcome to my world. I'm combining English and Japanese. Water, fire, wind, void. All right. Be careful. Some people mix up the Godai and the Go-Gyo. Go-Gyo is water, wood, fire, earth, metal as a cycle, either productive or destructive. Represents the Kongokai. The Godai, earth, water, fire, wind, void. Chi, Sui, Ka, or He, Fu, Ku, right? So this is how things kind of show up. So this is a classification system. The other one is a transformational kind of system, right? But what we're talking about here within these is emotional states. Okay? So what's your state going to be when the person approaches you? Not after he approaches or the first punch is thrown and your adrenal response kicks in. Your starting point. Because Earth could be neutral and everything's good. I'm not worried. I'm confident, that kind of thing. It can also be depressed, lazy, sluggish, because most students are introduced, including my own, to the positive attributes of the Godai because we want to be productive and use them. Most don't recognize or don't know that there's a negative trait or attribute to them, with the exception of void. There is no negative void. Void is thinking and creativity, right? What's the opposite of thinking and creativity? Yeah, blank, empty. Right? So there is nothing. Okay? But we've got calm, confident, right? Not bothered, that kind of thing. We have defensive, right? Concerned, right? Fire, we have aggressive, right? Or afraid, fear. Right? Fear is a great motivator. It's also a great immobilizer. Okay. Wind is it's carefree. It's adaptive. Right? It is open, non-fixed, and then void is the strategic thinking, and it's the communication that goes on, right? Either with our bodies or we're talking to them. Hey, whoa, I don't need trouble, right? A lot of people, because they train in silence, they forget that you can talk to the person. Whoa, hey, right? That kind of thing. Motherfucker. Okay, so, right? So here's the question. On the day, in the moment that you're being attacked, what's your emotional state? Don't know. So, okay, so I should have techniques that are, and this is an incorrect thing. People, because we give them techniques that fit these to make it easier to teach this side, right? They will often think that there are earth techniques, water techniques, fire techniques. There's a bunch of people running around calling this bullshit because there's no such thing as earth techniques, water techniques. And they're absolutely true. They're absolutely right. The student who thinks that there's water techniques, fire techniques, right? I had that same problem when I was coming up through the ranks, right? That had to be broken because there's no such thing, right? There is energy of one type or another. There's strategy of one type or another, because we could come at this not from the emotional state, we could come up from the mental state, right? Strategic application, those kind of things, right? How we think about that person, right? What what our assessment of them is, right? Right? He's a killer. Seriously, you don't bother me at all, right? Or low class or whatever. We do it all the time. Come on, man, right? So this is just one of those things. So what's necessary here is also insight, right? So I don't know what emotional state I could be in of my own accord, life leading me to up to that moment. Also, I don't know who or what that attacker is going to be or what they're coming at me with and what state they could drive me into. Because I could walk around thinking I'm just jack shit. And this guy comes at me and he's got a belt buckle the size of frickin' New Jersey in front of my eyes. And he's way up there. And suddenly I'm feeling like, dude, I'm in trouble. Okay. So since I don't know these, I should probably train, right? So are there 5 or are there different conditions, right? But what I'm looking at right here is Koku, and now all of these can be moved over. Okay? Can you do Koku absolutely calm and in control of the situation? Sure you can. Most people practice that way in the dojo, right? Can you practice it? What would it look like if you were trying to be an opportunist, right? And moving more like an ocean wave or whatever, right? Can you do it from this fire perspective where, like, I'm going to charge that strike that's coming in, boom, boom, and go from there, right? Wind, right? What if I had to circumvent this thing because if this guy even if we touch at the arms, he's that big and that strong that he's just going to break things down. Yes, it's true. Okay, like never, ever, ever do an ichimonji or standard uke nagash or ichimonji, seigan, that kind of thing, against a haymaker. Okay? Everybody think because people focus on blocking, right? That kind of an attack or a hook kick, spinning kick, whatever, right? Okay? It will break this down. You don't have enough muscle structure around here to hold that in place, right? Your arms would have to be as big as his thighs to be able to have a fighting chance in that, pun intended. Okay, so again, this is just one variable. Okay, the emotional state, right, and or the strategy, right? Earth, rooted, unyielding, holding ground, crushing through, that kind of thing, right? Water, right? Defensive, that kind of thing, but it's also flowing around. It's adaptive timing, tricky timing, taking a new shape mid-technique, right? Just like water can alter shape and whatnot. You get the idea, right? So what you need to understand about this thing here is that these don't just change the feel of a technique. They change your intent, timing, entry strategy, psychological dominance, and a whole bunch more. Okay? But this is part of us. Either we brought it to the fight or this attacker or attackers or scenario triggers us to slip into one of these. And if we only ever train where we're all calm, cool, and collected, or we're the, fiery explosion kind of guy or whatever, and we get forced into one of these other ones, what happens with most fighters is they just cave. They're like, whoa, 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 I'm in trouble. Okay. Some people are dumb enough to, fight upstream, in a rainstorm with an explosion going on in front of them. Okay. All right. So let's get through this. Focus number 2 is more on the intellectual side. This is about strategic thinking based on the problem to deal with, right? So where this is the Godai no Kata, focusing on emotions, right? We're going to go all into strategy here. And so the focus here is the Ryuha. This is the lineages. Okay? So I just made different colors. They all represent a different one. We could put Gyokoryu in the middle, Koto, Tagagi Yoshin, Kukishinden, Gikan, Kumogakure, Gyokushin, and what I missed, Shinden Furoryu. I might have missed another one. Either way. So we've got 9 schools, nice and convenient, right? So what could happen then is, since Koku is a Gyoko Ryu kata, right? We learned Koku Gyoko style. But then we could use the different lineages because they all have a different type of movement, different type of strategic focus, primary combat principles, those kind of things, right? So then we do Koku Koto style. And then we do it based on Kuki Shinden approach. And then we do it based on Tagagi, Yoshin Ryu. Then we do it Shinden Fudo Ryu, whatever, right? So that what we have is not just one way to do a step-by-step form. We have different strategic applications of that idea, of that control factor, okay? But to get to here, there's also a process, right? First, we learn the kata. In the Bujinkan, this is the way it happens. First, you learn the kata as a hybrid, right? As a hybrid, or a hybrid example, right? As Soke teaches them, right? And what that means is the Bujinkan focuses on very specific principles. Anybody that came in for our recent spring camp, where I was focusing on Koto Ryu secrets, a lot of people didn't come in because, well, Noguchi Sensei is teaching a lot of Koto Ryu seminars and all that. Great, fantastic, okay? Or they know them, right? I got all the techniques and whatnot. But the Koto Ryu, as it was brought into the Bujinkan in its original state, as done classically, doesn't look like normal Bujinkan movement. It looks very much like hardstyle karate. It doesn't flow easily between the different points, right? It is a catch and kill kind of thing, right? So we learn it Bujinkan hybrid style, right? And then we focus on the kata as intended, as developed by its specific ryuha, right? And then we focus on each kata from a particular ryuha through the lens of each of the others. So Koku from the Gyoko Ryu would be, once we know it this way, right? So we learned it hybrid, then we learned it Gyoko, right? Which is what I have for my first to second dans. And then upper levels are going to be doing it Koto, right? Hatsumi Sensei has done the Kihon Happo training this way throughout the years. Manaka Sensei as well, right? There's a video out there floating around. Kihon Happo using the principles of the Gikkan view, okay? So, but we'll do it this way, right? We could swap this out for Yokuto, which is the first kata on the Shoden no Maki of the Koto school, right? So Yokuto, scoop up and send away, scoop up and fly, something like that, right? So Yokuto, now it's going to be learned Koto style, and then we're going to do it Gyoko, Kukishinden, Tagagi Yoshin, that kind of thing. So there's a bunch of different ways to apply this, right? But instead of focusing on being creative just for the fucking sake of being creative, because in the moment, you are going to make up the technique as you go along, not intentionally. He's leading the dance. So whatever he leaves open, if I got something close, I'm going to use it on it, whatever, okay? I'm going to use the act of creation to create things based on very specific factors, okay? So I could run through this instead of this just being the opposite. What if one pass through was 8 different ways that punch that's coming at me could come? 8 different angles, or we've got high punch, mid punch at my chest or a grab, low, right? These are all punches, right? Hooking punch, right? But is it a tight hook, this kind of thing? Is it a big old haymaker kind of thing? Or is it one of these flailing guys, right? My uke nagash has to adjust for that. Okay? Can't do uke nagash the same way, right? So high, middle, low, what I just put in there, the hell was that? I don't know. Anyway, is it a lead punch? Is it a cross punch? Is it a lunge punch? Is it a what we might call a back fist, right? Or we in the dojo here we call it a clubbing fist, right? Where they come in this way. Okay. So how do I handle any of these? Right? We could turn these into kicks. We could turn these into grabs. Those kind of things, right? Now we're being strategic about our Henka creation. So we're going to train the process based on variables that we have control of or don't have control of, but we should prepare for because of insight, right? That way, we every time we go through these, we minimize the chances of being punched, kicked, grabbed, right, by somebody in a way that we've never seen and we've never trained because we don't just do them once. That variation becomes the technique that we're going to practice and practice and practice until we can't get it wrong. I know this is going to keep you busy for a long time, not the drive up window of martial arts. Okay. So we're going to make sure that we minimize the chances of any type of punch, grab, kick, whatever coming at us that we've never seen before, we don't have experience dealing with, and we don't know like where to go to, right? We're going to train under different emotional conditions, okay? So we can simulate it in the dojo, but the best way to do this is to freaking train regardless of whether you're agitated or you're anxious or like, you're just over emotional or whatever, right? Or just kind of feeling kind of lazy today. Great. Okay. Good. Fantastic. Okay. What's your body do when you're lazy? Okay. Or we're just kind of carefree or I don't know, dude. I just, I don't feel like doing anything set or whatever. Okay. Now do something set because his body and his attack is forcing you to do something set, right? Because you're limited by environment, whatever. Okay. You could also, I didn't put this on here, but we could go out to different environments, right? How you can do this on uneven ground? How you can do this if you're in a park and there are raised roots coming out of the ground or divots in the ground, right? How you going to do this on a slope, right? How you going to do this when there's a curb behind you, up or down? How you going to do this when there's a set of stairs behind you, up or down, different height, okay? What are you going to do? How are you going to train your techniques and stuff on slippery surface, right? Somebody just mopped the floor. It's ice. It's loose gravel. It's sand, whatever, okay? Again, Hatsumi Sensei, I keep going back to his statement. Way too many people train like everything is going to be perfect and on their side and all the control is going to be theirs and all the advantage is going to be theirs. And I hope so, but probably not. Okay. And then we've got this other upper level, which means we are absolutely required to know the difference in approaches, leading principles and concepts and whatnot of each of the lineages so that we can correctly adapt and come at the technique through that lens. So here's the good news and bad news. Bad news is you're going to die trying to do all this stuff. Okay. Good news is you don't need any more techniques than you already have, because when you run this Kihon Happo process, you will rediscover all the techniques on all the scrolls in all the lineages, and then a shit ton more. Okay, will it keep you busy? Absolutely. Okay, see a news story? Shit, how they come at him, or a CCTV video? Instead of theorizing about how you deal with it, get out on the dojo floor. Okay, and then like, would Koku handle that? Okay? So I can start to not only adapt given techniques, but also know what kind of conditions that technique is not only the shittiest possible or choice that I could make, but it shouldn't even be on my list. Okay, so this is taking control of this and not just talking about it. We're focusing on strategic creation of Henka based on different conditions and not just being creative for the sake of being creative. And we're also talking about developing Henka as variations and then treating each of those as a kata itself and training the shit out of it so that when that kind of possibility pops up, gee, did I? Okay, it just comes out. Okay, so This all belongs in the realm of Ha in the Shuhari model. Okay, Shu, right? You have to do the technique, no variations, nothing, right? Shu means to copy or preserve. As your teacher gave it to you, you do. So sure, yeah. At the Shu level, we've got kata obedience. Okay, and we're going to go through a phase with each technique, right? Where we're going to have a brain freeze or a brain fart, whatever, right? Okay, a dilemma. Is this a good technique for this situation? Is it not a good technique for this situation? That's what Randori training is for, right? But until we start building up Henka that handle very specific variations, hook punch versus straight punch, back fist versus hook, or uppercut, right? Or the condition, the situation that I'm being driven into, or I can't get out of that funk, or whatever, right? Then we're just making up shit just to be creative. Or hopefully, we're not relying on this as a way to make up for shitty taijutsu. Not my words, other master teachers' words. They just don't say it publicly all the time. Okay. So, anyway, that's what I have. If you have any questions, anything like that, you can always put it in the comments. I try to get to them as much as I can. Not always possible, but I try. Also, this leapfrogs into our Friday masterclass. So the link is there at the bottom of the page. Let me shift my screen back here so that I'm where I'm supposed to be. There we go. Oops. There we go. Okay. So there's your URL for this one, Better Options Masterclass. It's already set up. You can get enrolled and whatnot. So what I'm thinking right now is that for the Friday Masterclass, we're probably going to be taking a look at a different option. Okay. At a different focus for these. But we'll see how I feel at the time for the class. But either way, we're going to be looking at creating strategically sound Henka based on the same principles and concepts of the root kata. Okay? Remember Hatsumi Sensei's quote, there is a huge difference between a true Henka and doing whatever the hell you want. Doesn't mean that it didn't work. It's just not the same thing, and it might not even be ninjutsu, right? And I get it, right? As long as it worked in a real situation, call it taijutsu, call it ninjutsu, call it whatever you want. But for a Henka to be a true Henka, it has to use the same principles and concepts and the same control factors and things like that as the root kata, or it's not a koku Henka. It's not a yokuto Henka. It's not an Ichimon's no kata Henka, right? It's something else. Okay, so we're going to again. These types of training are for people that want more than just kata collecting. The upside here is whatever you have, you can 8 times it, 16 times it, because you have to do the same things left and right. Every time you come up with a variation, now you got 2 because you're going to do it left and right. Right. If you take every one of those variations and run it through the Godai elemental or strategy kind of thing, you just multiplied it by 5 if you're doing just the emotions, 10 if you do emotions and strategy, right? And you can multiply all of that by another 9. 9. Yeah, well, 8, because Koku belongs to the scroll. Anyway, okay. So this will keep you busy for a little while, right? So I'll understand if I don't see you in Whiteboard Wednesday for a while, but hopefully I will. Okay. So anyway, hopefully I'll see you for Friday's class. If not, no harm, no foul. Maybe I'll see you for Kuden next week, or I'll see you for, wait, I take that back. Next week, I'm actually on vacation. So there will not be a Kuden or a Whiteboard Wednesday next week. We're going to skip over that one. We will probably have something that auto runs, right? One of the old episodes or something for Kuden and for Whiteboard Wednesday. So there'll be something in place. It just won't be a new lesson. All right. And then skip over that to the next week, and then we'll be back on track. And hopefully I won't have lost the attention of people easily distracted. But if I did, then what's that say about them as a student? All right, that's all I have. So I'll see you next time on Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday.